Good evening, ladies and gentlemen. It's Friday evening. It is 9 o'clock. Time to gather in the music room and live stream. But first, as always, a little music. Enjoy. We are all the heirs to Scotland, as a nation proudly stand. We will march beneath her banners to protect our ancient land. In the glens and cities, there on every street are the living heroes no army will defeat. Let a flag mean freedom and not a battle drum. To the world we bid a welcome in 1,000 different ways. We will toast to long lost friendships as we build our better days. In the glens and cities, there on every street are the living heroes no army will defeat. Let our flag mean freedom and not a battle drum. We are all the heroes of Scotland. We're a nation hand in hand. We will march beneath her banners to protect our ancient land. In the glens and cities, there on every street are the living heroes no army will defeat. Let our flag mean freedom and not a battle drum. Good evening, folks. I hope you're all cozy, comfy, and well. My special guest, SCOTS ARMOUR, is already with me here. And I'll bring him on in just a moment. However, we have two unfinished pieces of business from last night's stream. Now, I don't know how you feel about dealing with these two pieces of business. I have here a poem, Silius, which should have been put out last night, but I couldn't find it last night, so I didn't have it to read. And the other piece of unfinished business is Toffee was meant to come on last night, and let us know about his spooky experience. But first, before we do any of that, I'm going to bring in SCOTS ARMOUR. It's a bit rude leaving him there on the sideline, so to speak. Good evening, SCOTS ARMOUR.
Good evening, John. How are you doing, friend?
Not too bad. A wee bit tired because I've had a long day today. But apart from that, I'm not too bad, thank you. With this condition of mine, it's very much every day for itself.
All you can do is just take it as it comes, and I know the good thing with the people in the chat, they kind of make sure, it's getting to that time. And the last time I think I was in your chat, there was a couple of people, right, get to bed. Everybody's always making sure, that they're
Yeah.
putting their health first, which is quite pleasing, John. It's a good
Oh
count.
yeah, absolutely. It's very warm-heartedness of everyone in this stream, and it's always been that way. I've been very fortunate. Same with the guests. I don't think I've ever had a rude guest on or anything like that. I've never had any bother. So that's all good news. So I don't know how you feel about this unfinished business of mine from last night, Scots, or do you want us just to dive into our conversation, or would you like me to deal with it? I think with the poem, I'd like to hold on to that because he's not here yet. Sillius. So I'll hold on to that. I don't know if Toffee wants to come on or not. He was meant to come on last night, but time, I think I went into 2.5 hours or something. So he never got his spot. But I don't know if he wants to come in tonight. Where is he? Oh, there he is there. Right. Okay. He's gonna leave it. Probably come on another time. How's that?
Make sure you hold them to account. I'd be quite keen to hear the story.
Yeah, absolutely. I'm keen to hear it myself. I always enjoy listening to people's life story, whether it's a spooky one or not. It doesn't really matter to me. I just find it's one of the. Honestly, I'm not just saying this, Scots, but I've always found it a real joy in life. One of the great things about I found it when Laura and myself and Lorraine we first started going to Spain on a holiday, meeting other people from different parts of our island, and just listening to them tell their stories of their lives. I just found all that fascinating. Um, and everyone, of course, insists that they are just ordinary people, but I always argue back that there is no such a thing as an ordinary person. I think we're all extraordinary.
Yeah, I mean, I think, and this is one of the things that I really enjoy about this wee island of Wales that we share with our Welsh, English, and other counterparts. I don't really want to get into the whole Irish side of it because I know if you kind of label them wrongly, they get a wee
I
bit
think
rubbed up the wrong way. But
it's a bit testy.
nonetheless, and I suppose like for ourselves, right, we're living in the Central Belt, the Greater Glasgow and Clyde Valley district, and then you've got the Edinburghs across the other coast. There's quite a wide variation of storytelling, of the way that you do it, the way that you present it, and there's little twists and add-ons, and there's different interpretations and contexts. And then the further up north you go, they've got their own kind of a sporadic pieces. It's quite individualistic to where they are, and it's the same with people down south, the same with the people in Wales. It's always quite a pleasing thing, because you hear all this hocus pocus of the last few years, pardon the pun, that you've got to go to places like, with the greatest respect to, like, Romania, to find like a real sense of a horror or a spooky tale. You get quite a few belters from Germany as well.
Oh, it's a load of nonsense. Well, it's a load of nonsense in the sense that that is not the only place. Europe, like our own island, is saturated with myth and legend. But we've got tons of it here. We've got bucket loads of it here. We could export. It's another one of my irks, if you like. One of the things, I suppose, that helps to set me out politically is our history, Scottish history, and Scottish legend and Scottish mythology is ignored in this land. Now, my pal, whom I cannot name, he is very, very high up in the education system, in history. And for the 30 odd years that we've known each other and been close friends, we spend quite a bit of our time speaking back and forth about this. And I'm always saying to him that if I were ever to come to power in Scotland as a First Minister, I would hire him to revamp the whole history as it's taught in schools, to include the mythology and the legends and the real history about where we come from, etc., etc. Because all of us, I would argue, don't know nearly enough about ourselves. I think that's pretty awful.
Yeah, I mean, see, in many respects, this is part of the problem, and it's a finer conversation you had, if you might call it, in the quote unquote grassroots movement of the Scottish independence. They'll always sit there and they'll have conversations about, we weren't taught this at school and we weren't taught that, and they advocate for a shady hand of the English doing that we're somehow subjugated through a lack of knowledge. But I mean, you look at parts of England, they people as well, they've got a bit of an identity crisis, because they've got the same bampots in education down the road as we've got up here.
Oh, that's
And by
for sure.
large part, the simplicity of the propaganda that is being put upon the people of this island is, if people have no sense of where they come from, they have no direction to go in.
Correct. Well made point. Well made point. I mean, I have pointed often in my life at different times. I've pointed to the hills and the mountains around us, and I'll say to cousins and second cousins and what have you, and my own son when he was much smaller. Um, you realise, of course, that the hills and the mountains weren't always like that. This is a result of being a conquered country, in part, and in part due to capitalist factors that have length, the destruction of the natural habitat in Scotland and England and Wales. And again, it's stuff that people don't seem to be aware of. And but I would say, Scots Armour, that children, if they're started in it and guided with a little knowledge, by the time they leave school, you know, I wouldn't expect them to be holding master degrees in Scottish history, but they could know a hell of a lot more, uh, enough to be sympathetic to the landscape as it is at the present time. Because if the right people were in power and the public wanted it, changes could be made over a period of time to make the landscape somewhat more natural than it is. I don't know how you feel about that.
One of my peeve hates, for better or worse, Glasgow right now has been going through this transformation for the last 15 to 20 years. In some parts, they've greatly needed it. I'm not going to kind of cover up that fact, because that has been an issue. A lot of the buildings, especially in the schemes, as we call them,
Yeah,
you'll know that yourself, John,
yeah,
have been there for basically pretty much the First Great War. Then obviously there were certain areas that got bombed a wee bit heavily in World War Two. So a lot of the scheme buildings themselves were quite needing a wee bit of brushing up. But the thing that absolutely sickens my stomach is you go into the city centre, and there's a part of the Trongate. For people that are in Glasgow, they'll probably know what about I'm talking about. There's a wee lane called the Old Wind that runs off the Trongate and takes you to the back, behind where the old TJ Hughes used to be. And across the road for us, right, and it's where the Trongate McDonald's is as well, geographically, if people kind of if that resonates with them better. They've got this beautiful old building, stunning piece of architecture, and then right next to it, they started this construction. And I had said to folk, wait till you see the state of this. I bet you this is going to be an absolute monstrosity. Well, it's finished now, but the best way to describe it, it's like multicoloured tinned building that's right next to this easily at least 100 to 200-year-old building, which has stood the test of time. It's been absolutely beautiful, and it's got this monstrosity right next to it. The only way to describe it is it looks like something straight out of a Brazilian ghetto.
good
It's just
God.
coloured tint all over the shop. And a lot of people go, oh, it's really nice. And then it kind of dawned on me, the people that are saying this, they're the lefty hippie dippies that kind of would kind of I suppose tell you that rural Africa that's got these tinned and mud huts is a thing of beauty. It resonates more with them than what it would do for the standpoint of people that believe in not just in traditional values, but a traditional sense of achievement in building something that truly is stunning and nothing that's just, quite frankly, cheap,
Yeah,
tacky, and something that should have been binned a long time ago. I don't understand why a modern person who prides himself in work when it comes down to in the field of architecture would put their stamp in a major city in the world, the third biggest city in this island. You're putting your stamp on something and they want to go for a fucking Brazilian ghetto piece. It's madness.
well, we've got a similar thing down here, insofar as a bit trickier to describe, I think. But 19th century, they built an education college in honour of James Watt. It was to do with navigation. Young men went there to learn naval skills of navigation and communication, etc. But sitting on this site was an older building, it was a cottage, a stone cottage. And what they did with it is they built the James Watt College around it and enclosed it onto the town hall. So there is only one way you could ever see this building, through what we call down here, I'm sure it's the same where you are, a wide pen. It's a gated wide pen, and you need a key and what have you to get through it. Now, this thing has got to be at least 250 years old, Scots, or more. And I have questioned people for years now, and I'm still waiting on somebody telling me they know the existence of this place that looks like a house, and I strongly suspect that's what it once was, a house. So you've got these things all over the place, but I've got to. I get myself into trouble when I speak this way locally, but I can't help myself because I see it as being the truth. So what you've got here on the council is you've got a set of people who are basically ignoramuses. They don't know anything and they don't care because they're not on the council to project the people of the town or the town itself. They're only on the council to get their salary and get some sort of cureness from being a town councillor. And will you mention anything like this to any of them, A, they don't know what you're talking about, and when you finally get it into their skull what you're talking about, they won't support it. Just don't care. Just don't care at all. When I think of when the shipyards came down, it exposed many, many very old buildings that had been just just ignored in the rush to put up shipyards and make money. And I thought when the shipyards were coming down that this was going to be a real opportunity to do something artistically creative with the town. Now, I don't mean turn it into some futuristic space place, but just simply return it to stone built dwelling houses and shops. Not a bit of it. It's all given over, all ended up back in private hands again. So everything that should have been eventually being made public uh, did for about 5 minutes, and now it's back in back in private hands. All that dockland that I'm sure you've seen, that all belonged to the town or the people of the town. All of it built with town money. It's all in private hands. All of it. Criminal, I say. But
I'm not surprised, John, to hear that. I mean, based on common acceptance of times gone by, towns and cities were built and laid out in the very nature of the way that the people lived and worked. That's the way that the designs of these places were meant to be. And over time, what they've done is they've basically sold everything in a mass real estate sell off. They've economised the schemes in the shops in the high streets they've brought in these supermarkets donkeys ago, essentially utilising and monopolising the business at focal points throughout the cities and towns. Stripped away family businesses, which meant that the units and the properties and the land themselves has been sold off into private hands, commercialised into private rent, opportunistic thieving hyenas. You've heard me saying for the longest time we've been talking, I call these people corporate whores, and that's exactly what they are. They're corporate whores. And
Absolutely.
And then we had the Commonwealth Games up in Glasgow. And I don't know if you had seen the news that was coming out with that. The poor people that were affected with these games, they called it a success, John. A success. People were booted out their homes for refusing to sell their land. So essentially what happened is the Scottish Government intervened, sent people, surveyors, out to the properties, basically measured it on a metric of inch by inch. What is that land measured and valued it by the inch, and then basically gave these people, say, 60 or 70,000 pounds, despite paying over 100 grand for their homes, and gone, right, bump, that's it, you're out. We've got your house, there's money, get to fuck effectively. And for me, the saddest thing in all of this is that communities that stood the test of time, that generations, grandparents to children, and then, so on and so forth, that all kind of have made the characteristic nature of these schemes has been destroyed. Literally, in the space of a generation, bang, gone. And there's no fixing that now. None whatsoever. But yet, the problems that we have seen for that still go on. You look at places like Edinburgh, people can't get houses in Edinburgh, people can't get houses in Glasgow. Why? Because these corporate whores, these charlatans, have bought up so much property, they make silly money doing the Airbnbs whilst we've got our own people sleeping on the street. But the council themselves won't intervene. Why? Because they make a hefty buck off it themselves.
Yeah. Glasgow's the same. The amount of corruption that's not there. I mean, I think one of the first times we ever spoke, I was completely shocked when you told me that the Glasgow Council it wasn't even responsible for bin collections. I mean, I was absolutely shocked by that.
See, the thing is with Glasgow, right? So I had this conversation with somebody earlier on today, funnily enough, and it's like the taxi trade, for example, right? This is the most recent example to use for folk that perhaps would maybe see it from a different side. So traditionally speaking, you've always had the black cabs in Glasgow, and then as years have went by, they've brought in the private hire. But now with the private hire, you've got the Uber drivers as well. And the market is so saturated that the best way to basically for the government and the city council to come in to get even more money was to bring in these low emission zones. All the black taxi drivers had to change their cabs to electric. Sometimes for drivers this was costing upwards of £12,000 to upgrade. A lot of boys couldn't afford that because let's be honest, who really has £12,000? Who's got £5,000 lying about, never mind 12?
That's a big load of money, that.
Oh, aye. So essentially, all these cabs, right? Basically, I think there's been like 400 cabs since this has come in. The black cabs that have been done away with. The Uber drivers are all right because to a certain point, that's a recent thing. So it's only recent models of cars that are allowed to use that for the time being. But the contracts are opening up, and again, there's going to be more saturation in the market. So as the demand comes up, the government's going to be faced with one or two things: to either bring it under the umbrella of the council, which means that they'll be coining in absolutely every single fucking cunt's pocket, pardon my language. Or they'll just do it away with, and obviously that's what they're open for, to basically everybody just uses the public services. However, with the cleansing, what they've done is they've cut the services back so far that they've had to bring in other companies. I think one of them's called Virador or Vitador. They're French. And then you've got another one, it's called Biff or Sif, I believe. Again, you wouldn't think it, but the market for contracts in Glasgow is so saturated because now you've got independents that have come onto the scene as well. And nobody knows, and this is only for what I'm hearing, nobody knows 9 times out of 10, or if you want to call it on grounds or roots or whatever, really who owns what route and who owns the other, because the communication with the people about who's taking charge of their bins is non-existent, to the point where there's certain schemes in Glasgow that have had their rubbish sitting for 2 and 3 months at a time before a singular uplift.
Holy Ghost. That's dangerous for health.
Oh, of course
Apart
it
from
is.
anything else. Apart
My
from anything
mate
else.
has got a recording. He's got one of these, what do you call it, like CCTV setups, because there was a lot of burglaries running about. So he's basically kitted out his house, and it was coming up to last Christmas, so it was about Halloween time. His bins got emptied, and the next pickup was about the 14th of January, if I'm correct. That was like last year into this year.
That's outrageous. You don't realise, Scots, just how bad things are until I speak to somebody like yourself who is either in the know or is got people who are in the know, so they can pass on the information and find out exactly what's happening. I'm sure there's just as much corruption going on down here. And I know that the taxi drivers do nothing but complain about the corruption. As I say, I find it so frustrating that we can't do anything unless we've got political power.
The thing is, though, in a very sad way, John, there has been people that's been. I've been quietly watching. A lot of folk will say to me, "You don't attend things. You don't go here. You don't go there." I've been silently watching what's been happening in Glasgow since about school time. I think I had this one of the first conversations I had with you. I was a very apolitical person at school. I was very switched on. Not saying I was the wisest by any means, but I was very switched on. I paid attention,
Uh,
and I've been sitting quietly watching constant confrontation after confrontation, challenge after challenge, petition after petition, and it's never got anywhere. Whether that be people collectively coming within a scheme, whether that be people collectively coming within a work movement, or educators challenging the government, challenging the council, time and time and time again, nothing gets done. We look at the Scottish government right now. You can take it right back to Derek Mackay was effectively grooming young boys. You know, we've seen Philip Schofield, he basically got a slap in the wrist and lost his job. This Derek Mackay guy, effectively, he got paid leave. The taxpayer were paying for him to go to the Caribbean on holiday and all the rest of it. Nothing changes. I don't even think, and I truly mean this with the bottom of my heart, even if there was people in positions to challenge this, whether it be sitting representatives of like a Glasgow Northeast or a Glasgow South Side or in the Inverclyde region, and people truly try to contest this at Holyrood, I think they would silence you before you actually go into chambers. I'm not talking about assassinate you. I'm talking about they would find a reason for you to not be in the building on that day, because the layers of the onion when it comes down to how things are run in this country, never mind how they're done regionally, is not been fit for purpose for the longest time. But it is so multi-layered, and it all goes hand in hand back to the same points that, for me, in all honesty, people talk about the American politics, people talk about the London establishment, they talk about the Brussels establishment. They would get red cheeks if they had looked at Scotland, because this is basically commonomics 101. And for me, and I agree with it, but I agree with Mr. Woodlander, absolutely correct. The problems, how the mess that we're in this country, the things that are happening to good, honest, decent people, is because of the quote unquote democratic system. The only way things can change is removing the system or disengaging with the system.
well, I suppose I've come round to, if you like, a compromise, and I'll tell you what the compromise is. I'm beginning to agree that politics alone will not answer the problem. However, and I've given this some thought, and it's probably been in my mind since Woodlander started up his initiative. And it's this. I still think the political solution is better served in Scotland because of the voting system. So just bear with me. So I will use uh, Greenock as an example. Uh, if my party or any of the three parties that we have in existence, I don't mind who it would be, could take control of the town council here, a lot could be achieved, but that's not the end of it. In our party rules, it says that anyone and everyone who becomes a town councillor or a councillor in Edinburgh will have to give up a sizable percentage of the salary they earn. Now, one time, at the time when I came up with this idea, now I know it's not unique, but when I did come up with it originally, I thought, well, we could use that money then to propel the party. But I've now been beginning to think that that money would be better spent if it was to be either put into a parallel pot or the same pot as the Woodlander to buy more land, buy it quicker. And therefore, what I'm suggesting is that for everyone in the political system who gets themselves voted, some of that salary should be required to be put in to the funds to buy the land. And I think that would be better served. And it would give us at the same time the opportunity, perhaps slowly, perhaps not, give us the opportunity to make real improvements, albeit small improvements in the town. This is the way I'm now thinking.
Personally, I can see logically, because I mean you've had many discussions over the years, and it's probably took a great deal for you to navigate to that position. For me, and I don't mean to be rude when I say this, John, please don't take it the wrong way. It sounds nice, but the sad reality, not even just politically, socially, right across the face of this earth, everything is governed by money, and they have an unlimited source of money. And for many people in the West, and it's not just a small percentage, we're talking about a good 80 to maybe pushing 90%. I'm not saying they're all corrupt, but they're all motivated by shekels.
Agreed.
And we've got many people in the sphere that I believe that that's all they're about. It's all about money. It's all about material wealth. There's nothing there. There would need to be a complete change within a short cycle of ideals, values, and spiritual optics for that to be even a practical solution at a later date down the line, for that to have any sense of meaning. But as long as the political sphere is continually dominated by this pop-up, quote-unquote, banking system, which is just a death grip that's got the whole world, never mind the Western world, the whole world under the tyrannical boot of these absolute parasitical hyenas. Until that changes, their design, their architecture, if you like, they're plumbing the whole means of politics, social, academia, is all through their flow of finance. You'd need to cut off the head and then work the way down for that to be any sort of meaning. And I'll give you the best example that I can think of. It was during Barack Obama's tenure as the president of America, and in the state of Oregon, there was a couple of communities that banded together. They were growing their own food. They were trading. Say, for example, you've got oranges and I've got plums. Well, we're conversing. We're trading on issues like that. Somebody's got eggs. Somebody's got lamb. This is the way that things were working. They were collecting their own rainwater and stuff. You can go and check this. They had basically the first thing I believe they started with is they outlawed the collection of rainwater, and then they slowly started to work it down because it was a system that was created by the people, and it was working. It was taking the big government, it was taking the Federal Reserve right out the equation, but because they couldn't control that, they imposed laws upon it, which for me again would demonstrate that as long as we are bound by those rules that they set upon us, we won't take that progressive step forward to free ourselves of the shackles.
I take your point. I'm not going to argue against it because I know it's a strong point. I am saying that there are other banks already in existence that don't belong to the West that could be used. As I say, I'm thinking in terms of like a parallel system, unless now I think we would need to sit down with Woodlander and his folk and discuss this to find out if it could be done that we take say I was getting elected as a councillor, okay, um, and we were going to take 10,000 a year out of my salary uh, and put it into the Woodlander and find a mechanism of doing that. That's what I'm thinking. And for every councillor of ours that gets voted in, they have to agree to some kind of proportion of their salary to get put away.
See the Woodlanders idea.
Yeah.
It's on a longevity side of things. It's the most fresh and meaningful option that we have on the table that doesn't rely upon the need of government intervention. Now, can everybody do that? No, and I believe Mr. Woodlander's the first to point that out. But we've always found common agreement within the little things that you can take charge of, whether it's buying more water, buying more, things at home to stock up on, make sure
Yeah.
that you've got a little bit to self-reliance on yourself. These are all things that basically build up a discipline of self-improvement,
Sure.
that you're not needing to rely on the stores. If something was to go wrong, off the switch off the electricity, you're going to need to go with the begging plate. Unfortunately for us, in this present moment in time, we don't have people with serious cash that would be able to, for example, do a Paul McCartney and buy the Kintyre and have a couple of people effectively go over there and literally create an off-grid system. If we were able to pitch in, and this is a funny thing, I remember kind of having this debate some time ago with some idiot on Twitter of all places, and it was about the whole Anthony Joshua support black business, support black this, support black that. And I had said at the time, if us people UK wide supported our own industries, our own butchers or local greengrocers or local farmers, if we literally done that, a lot of their businesses would be done within 6 months flat out, because at that point in time there simply wasn't enough of them. Perhaps places like London and Birmingham would be the obvious exception, but by large part right up and down the country, a lot of their businesses would just die because they're relying on our money. If we had kind of started to build a path towards, I don't want to call it like a central point, and I don't want to say like a central bank, but if we had a mechanism and a means towards buying an area in Perthshire for folk in Scotland, and perhaps maybe somewhere down in the West Country for folk in England, to kind of outright say, for example, there's going to be 100 families there, and basically be the example for everybody to pull together in a network to launch a pad where it's viable, they can see it, they can
Yeah.
see it growing, they can see it working. Then I think the optics for that would take precedence over everything else. But until people wake up from the optics of the reliance of the central government, for me, the best thing to do is just to gently point out the things that why this isn't going to work.
I get that. I would support that. Do support it. But my experience with people is with, well, perhaps it's not. I'm going to say this. You can correct me if I'm wrong. Uh, my experience with people was a lot more jaundiced than that. You can point out the most obvious corruption to people, and it moves them not. They shrug their shoulders in apathy.
See, this might be a complete left thing to say for someone like myself, right?
Yeah,
A lot of people think somebody's coming to save them.
you think so?
Yeah, a lot of people, they have this ignorance that someone's coming to save them. I don't need to do that, because somebody will step in at some point and take charge. Someone will come along and fix this. There's no need to worry. And I know I sit here and I've said this in previous streams where I wouldn't worry about things because in the end we win. But the point being that I'm about to make backs that up. It's the exact same, like, for example, when the Viking invaders used to come down and they would go on their pillaging up and down on the coast of Britain. And a lot of people would look and they would go, God's going to step in and save us. They were literally waiting for a physical intervention
Uh,
when you were given courage and strength by God to challenge that.
sure.
It's the will of the people. And this is the point where a lot of people get misguided. Folk think because, for example, there's a second coming of Christ, that we don't need to do anything until then. Nowhere in the Bible does it say that we have to be pacifist. It is on us to call it corruption. It is on us to stand firm. It is on us to step up when that needs to be. And over the
Absolutely.
course of the millennia on this island, when push comes to shove, there has been men's up and down the country, village to village, town to town, city to city, that's congregated and fought back and made this country what it is. Those people's spirit, their blood that's in the soil, their blood that runs through our veins, up and down Scots, English, Welsh, Irish, so on and so forth, they remain within us today. That is why I said that we will win this. We will win this fucking very easily. When the chips are on the table, when push comes to shove, we will win, and we will win comfortably, and things will change drastically there on going forward. But the reason why I continuously say that is because historically we have evidence of this repeated issue being nipped in the bud, but it just happens to be that the next time when that stance happens, that will be the final straw. There won't be another chance for the enemy to get to this point, because people are just too intelligent and too woke up and, quite frankly, too pissed off to even let this happen again to future generations. That is why I've continuously reiterated that point on streams.
And beside that, Scots, uh, it won't only happen here, it'll happen elsewhere, and people will see that also. That the tyrants, and I'm being polite when I use that word, are being dusted off. And when people see that elsewhere, that will also give them confidence. But everything you say, I agree with and I know about, and I say to other folk, I suppose maybe it's just my personality that shows up all the time, and my added into my age now. I don't have time for this. Um, I want it now, and and I know that as a result of my age. As I said, one of the first things I ever said on a live stream, Scots, was, uh, "Where have you guys been? Because I've been waiting for years for you fellas to show up. Where have you been?" Now I know the answer to all of that, but the point I'm making is people haven't that, and I don't think people have that internal vision that you have, that I think I have. I think somebody like the Woodlander has, and other folk have. I know we're not alone with this. We have this internal vision for our country, but there seems to be so many don't have it, and that light, that internal light, doesn't seem to be being switched on no matter what we say.
See, in fact, I remember you reiterating that actually when, like, the first time I had actually had a conversation with you, funnily enough, just when you mentioned that there. But see, for a lot of people, and I think the events naturally that have happened from the Great War right up till the present day, you've had the Great War, then the country went, basically, the army got disbanded, the country kind of went into a derelict state. Then World War Two happens, which was absolutely a catastrophe to say the least. Then they come out of that, then there's unemployment, there's issues, right across the whole bloody continent, the American economic Great Depression, then all the issues with coal mining, etc., getting shut down. A lot of people have kind of had a lot of compact of terror and propaganda in a short space of time, which I think inherently has been passed down generation to generation to generation, and they've not really been able to shift the monkey off the back, so to speak. But nowadays, fortunately for the internet, and this has been one of the real highlights, that it is demonstrated a, a point, a hub where if you really want to go looking for things, it can be done. It's like you can take the horse to the water. If the horse drinks the water, the horse will obviously be well hydrated, it'll be nourished, and it'll be able to continue at peak performance. And that's like what the internet is for us. Sure, there is bad points with the internet, but for the good points, whether that be learning your history, whether that be learning about the political system, whether that be learning about how to grow your own food, or just things in general, if you use that for good, the amount of knowledge and wealth that you can give on and share with other people in your network, not only kind of strengthens you individually with a sharpness of mind, it is good for the soul of other people because they are picking up on those habits, they are questioning things, they are learning things. Our previous ancestors, our fathers, our grandfathers, so on and so forth, they never had that. They had to go to public libraries, and by large part, public libraries were a place of quite clearly
Or the
censorship.
pub. More
Yeah,
often than not, the pub.
pretty much, because in libraries you get a bunch of goodness, but it is controlled to a certain point because obviously they're the ones putting the books on the shelf. But with that, there's been a lot of trauma, and for some folk, they have not been able to wake up because of that tyranny, because of that propaganda, because of those rough, harsh conditions that have basically scorched the back of their mind. But optically looking at it for the young folk like perhaps myself and the younger ones that are coming through, we have been guided by sharp minds of older generations, and I hope it doesn't take, I hope he doesn't bit my arse for saying this, but people like the Woodlander, people like yourself, that have got wisdom, that have got intelligence, that have got capability of being able to look at things, read the room for what it is, and then will be able to converse in a very friendly way to put that out there. A lot of people will come here because they like the way that you story tell, they like the way that you present information, they like the way that you learn from you, and it's the exact same with like the Woodlander. A lot of people go to sense him because they like the way that he does his gig as well,
Yeah.
which helps young people being able to see the issues for what they are. And a lot of time over the years where people were coming out and speaking about things, they're just being labelled nutcases, send them to an asylum centre, so on and so forth. With the reality of the internet now, the minute something's up, it literally takes a couple of seconds before that's liked and shared.
Yeah.
And to try and stop that is a very, people think the government can control everything. I think in the sense of the internet, you have literally 5 to 9 or 10 seconds to delete that so that it's completely deleted. If not, it's still on the internet in some sort of capacity forever.
Yeah.
The government to control every single person's post every second of every day, nah, they can't manage that. They simply cannot do it.
Again, I'm with you here. I think my problem is that I've spent huge parts of my life thinking of all this, and at the same time, the world has grossly changed away from the way it was when I first thought to myself, I need to get into politics. I need to have my own party. It wasn't possible then. But you're right in what you say. People come to my channel, they come to yours when you're on, and Woodlanders, etc., etc., Sensims as well, and listen to what's being said and take it on board. And then when they go away to meet their friends and whatnot, uh, it is passed on in such a manner that it cannot be stopped or interfered with because it's word of mouth. It's back to that. And you know how strong that stuff is, word of mouth. That's how the working class got to where we are.
Well, that's kind of the basic principle and what makes a man. You judge them by their fruit, their word, and if they shake their hand on something, then I take that at face value. That's good as a gospel. If
Yeah.
someone was to kind of go away for that, let's say, for example, you and I are having a conversation and we agree upon, just because you've got your party, John, I turn and say, look, you and I can do this over a course of, say, 2 to 3 months, and this will basically, what we'll put into things, and hopefully this will be the outcome, and if this is outcome, this is basically the agreed upon conclusion. We
Uh-huh.
shake hands. If something was to change the goalposts, then I would go, right, okay, wait a minute, well, I'm not. I know you're not like that, but it's just as a general example for folk in the chat. Then I'd be like, but that's just the type of guy that I am. My father always said to me, you take a man at his word, and if he shakes your hand and says it's good, it's good. If it's bad, it's bad. That was the promise. And I think, again, that culture and that understanding over the years that used to be so ingrained within our society has been basically hogwashed and diluted because, again, like that, the greed of individuals of chasing wealth and
Yeah.
being conniving and underhanded, but effectively bringing in Jewish tactics to our way of life,
Yep.
have discarded the trust, and it's broken down confidence between your own brothers and sisters.
Correct. I mean, I do agree entirely. You know, shake on it. It's a deal. Or give your word. And it's who you give your word to does that matter to you? Of course it does. As I used to say, and I'm talking about when I was incredibly young, I came into this world poor because I belonged to the working class. And the only thing I have, well, it's not the only thing, but it's a very important thing that I have that has value, and that's my word. And I take that very seriously. So if I say to you, I'll do something, then I will do it because I gave my word as a man of honour, and honour is important to me. And it should be important to all of us, men and women. And for the most part, that's true, I think, Scots, even today.
Yeah, John, see for somebody like myself, I think this is why I relate with so many people like yourself, and it's not to do with like the age thing. It's nothing to do with. It's just to understand the principle of men. There's certain do's and don'ts, there's certain behaviours, there's certain respects, there's certain ways of doing things and agreeing upon things that is just ingrained within your fibre as a person. It's just been passed down naturally. It's very much within you as an individual. Sure, you can lose things over time, like we've seen with people right across our society, but if you're pretty much hardlined on things, it's very much a very hard ask to deprogram those behaviours out of you.
Absolutely. 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 And I have this thing I've always said about myself to myself is, and I say it with pride, that wonderful sin of pride. I don't think I could be bribed. If I was a First Minister, I don't think I could be bribed. I say that with huge confidence, but I don't know that because I've never been tested. So I don't know if I'm open to bribery. I want to believe that I would be corrupted, but I don't know. Not deeply, not in here, I don't know. And for most of us, that's true also, because most of us are never in a position to be tested. I like to think that.
Well, off the top of my head, and do you know something, John? I applaud the honesty in that, because a lot of people, and that's like myself, I'm very hard lined, but when you're faced with something, of a sheer magnitude, sort of would work out of what they're compromising you with. But just be like that. It's again, and I hate to do it. It's like, I'm pretty sure it's in the Book of Deuteronomy. It talks as a verse in Deuteronomy. I'm sure it is, and it basically says about not accepting bribes. You don't show um, partiality. You don't have any bias. You don't subvert. You don't sell your soul effectively, because obviously it takes away the wisdom and integrity of the man. I'm pretty sure that's in the Book of Deuteronomy. I could be wrong, but I'm pretty sure if you were to go digging, it might not be like that word for word, but pretty much the context is there. But the sad thing is, bribery, like usury, is a practice that has been underhanded within the Western world and right across the board, but particularly for us as Europeans, for a long, long time. It's trying to free yourself of those shackles now. With the aspect of bribery, I mean, we had literally seen in this country with Nicola Sturgeon. There was claims of misused funds and money that had went missing, and people were getting paid X amount of funds within different aspects of life within the Scottish frontline services, whether that through be healthcare, whether it be through the justice system, and still to this day there has been no clear demonstration of real findings on it. They just continue to reiterate that it's an ongoing process, which is a layman's term of just turning and saying, we're just basically saying this to make it look like we're doing something, but in reality we aren't. There hasn't been anyone that's been jailed. There hasn't been anything that's really offered anything substantial to turn and say, right, somebody's been done with this. They know that there's been bribery, but again, our system is so... it needs detoxified big time, but in order to do that, you need to basically uproot it and put it in the bin.
Yeah. Or if I could see another way, perhaps not as successful, but for example, if I was standing for election in Edinburgh, and someone did come along with a bribe, I think, well, and maybe I'm wrong, if I were to stand in a public place and denounce this person who had tried to bribe me in public, giving out all the details, don't you think that would cause such a ripple of embarrassment?
Well,
and it would stop it, of course.
Another example that I would use to shine a light on something that was said that never came to fruition, and it's when Donald Trump had turned and said that if he became president of America, Hillary Clinton would end up in jail. Now, throughout that whole presidential campaign, he continued to point out, illegal situations that played out under her jurisdiction, bungs, everything under the whole sun, and still to this day there has been no accountability with that. And we all know, I hope there's enough people in the chat to obviously have common sense to know that Donald Trump isn't a saviour on a white horse. He is also part of the international problem. He is also part of the problem which is happening in the world, and will continue to only enable that process. But it clearly demonstrated that despite even, and that clip went viral right across the world, despite even seeing that and billions of people having access to see that, no one stood up and asked the question, why haven't you done that yet? Why haven't you legally challenged this woman and her husband and put them in bars? Because he knows himself, if he had to do that, that would send ripples, and ripples can't happen. If the money flows, the people are safe.
Yeah, I know you're right. I just don't like conceding the point. So.
No, listen, I totally get that. See, I in an ideal world, like, I had a conversation a while ago, and it was like pretty much a friend turned and says, "Why don't you kind of get any local affairs?" And it was such a silly question because they know my stance with many things, John. And I turned and said, "See, even if I had the ability to be able to put myself through something like that, I wouldn't do it. I wouldn't stand locally, I wouldn't stand nationally, because see, at the end of the day, I am in no fit state of a person, and I don't say that as if I have issues. I am in not a privileged position in life where I can turn around and tell people to do this and to do that and not to do this and not to do that. Because see, at the end of the day, right, I believe if you're going to be standing up for your community, it should be done on the basis of a voluntary role. You're there to represent people, you're there for the betterment, you're there to make sure that people have got the basic security is met at the highest standard, then everything else after that is an absolute bonus in life. But for somebody like myself, and I don't say this for any sort of a sympathy or empathetic views, it's just the harsh reality. And I've had quite a bit of conversation since I've started doing the streams, which I thoroughly enjoy. But the reason, two reasons why I don't stream, this is kind of going to add into my point. The first reason is basically I'm working a lot, particularly around the clock. It's that time of year, and I just take every bit of working time that I can get to make sure that my family is in the best position it can be. And recently I've been helping out someone as well, but that's a whole other conversation. Secondly, I don't want to do political streams. The reason why I don't want to do political streams is because I think there's that many people doing them right now, especially in the UK. And I'm not a special chap by any stretch of imagination, nor am I the most intelligent chap for that matter. But there's a lot of people that can cover that and do a finer job, and they should be, commended. You should like their channels, you should subscribe. For myself, I kind of just want to point out things, have an honest discussion, and if it means that every now and again I get to talk about, my faith, then absolute grand. I don't mind having that conversation either. But I was told in private messages that my choice of faith was a deterrent to the direction which this country is going. It's a deterrent to people on this side of the fence, and that was just a continuous use of word. It was a deterrent. And I know that there's people that aren't Christian. I'd still stand shoulder to shoulder with them. They're still my brothers and sisters. I would still die for the cause alongside them. I would still do my best to protect them. But if people choose that that's an issue, then that's absolutely fine. It's their freedom of choice. I fully support that. But contextualise that with the people in my local community who perhaps maybe feel that that may be an issue. I wouldn't want someone feeling that someone who perhaps, like myself, was in a position to help but never really wanted that because of a personal choice like faith. I wouldn't that become a burden or a question mark on things. I think the country needs people that everybody can get behind, and it needs people to lead us away from the situation that we're in. People that are a lot more intelligent, articulate, and more importantly, I suppose that people that they could just back when the chips are down. And for that, it's always country before party. It is always my people before everything else, and quite frankly, Europa above all. So that is kind of a long point to kind of explain the reasons why and to articulate the point that I've just made.
I've never heard you say that before. Or if, or if you have made this point before, made in a completely different way. But I'm not going to try and change your mind, of course. Why? When it comes to matters of faith and God, I think I'm a simplistic person. I know God exists because I've experienced the spiritual world in my life and continue to experience it. So I never really talk about faith because I don't think I have faith. What I have, I think, is a certain amount of evidence, if you like, proof even. For me, it satisfies me. If other people who call themselves nationalists don't have it, I'm like you, that's fine by me. They don't have to have it. And I'm not going to fall out with people who don't have it. I just get a bit twittery on sectarianism. That's where I get a bit twittery. However, I truly believe that we are on the right side of God, the right side of destiny, and we will be successful in, in getting our country back. I might not love to see it. Uh, it's probably more likely that I won't live to see it, considering my health. But that's not, that's okay. I'll see it when I'm on the other side. I don't think it's something that we nationalists should be falling out over. Matters of faith and matters of God. That's my view on it. And I'm always suspicious for people who want to make such matters issues, turn them from opinions and philosophies and make them issues. I'm concerned when I hear that stuff. Fortunately, I don't hear much of it. We will win, Linda. Of course we will. Woodlander, we will win. Of course we will.
See, what I've kind of came to the realization of, like, I've not been in these spheres for as long as a lot of people, and I haven't been streaming in doing channels for as long as many people. And for each person that takes a stance, whether that be out in the streets, whether that be, doing their part in whatever setting that may be, even like that, doing channels, I fully applaud people. I would never berate folk for doing that. There is going to be a lot of things that people will agree and disagree on. There's going to be many things that people would kind of be chalk and cheese about. That's absolutely fine. I don't discourage it. The one thing that really, I suppose, that was quite eye-opening when I first kind of came into these networks, was the amount of infighting that happens through the silliest of optics, John.
Yeah.
And again, I need to reiterate, I'm no better than any man. I'm no better than any woman. I'm just a guy that just converses. That's all I am. I'm what it says in the tin, that is me. But for a lot of people out there, really intelligent, capable, talented people that indulge within the infighting, sadly, in my opinion, I don't say this to run them down. They do themselves a disservice. There's quite a lot of very likeable people that cross hairs with brothers and sisters over the silliest of things, and I think that feeds into the energy that the people on the other side of the fence get, because they see us fighting, they get more scope, they gain more ground, they gain more influence, and they're a lot more calmer in the approach to deal with things because they have more time because they're not fighting. But what I take as a positive from that negative is that there's a lot of passionate people here, all determined to do the right thing. Sure, we might have different ways of getting to that final destination, but we're all on the same train journey. We're just arguing about what route we're taking.
Yeah.
And for that, that is the hardest. That is the hardest stance to take, because see, when you bang the heads together and you point out the simplest, organic, natural reasoning there, guys, ladies, this is what you just need to look at. I think it would settle a lot of folk. I don't think folk are malicious. And as Woodlander said there, we will win. And like I said earlier on, because when the chips are down, we've got talent, we've got intelligence, we've got confidence, we've got a really lot of people that can motivate, a lot of people that can galvanise, a lot of people that can lead, a lot of people that can put things together and get it done to a very high standard. And although things may be hard, although things may seem that it's a tall order, an impossible ask, well, you've just got to look at the young lads at the age of 15, 16 that signed up because, for better or worse, they thought going to war was the right thing to do. They braved the Battle of the Somme. They went over the barracks and threw themselves into it and came back home. If they can do that, which in my opinion was a harder fight, we
Oh,
can
yeah.
certainly do this. You had young lads at the age of 14 that had to go out and train how to use a sword to fight off the Viking hordes. If they can do that, we can do this because their battle was harder. If you had young lads going right back to the Battle of Trafalgar with Napoleon, right down to the very front, into the midst with all the all the high tactician and commandos at the time, if you want to call them that, which Napoleon Bonaparte conquered the absolute toughest of places. Let's be absolute frank and honest. Egypt and the Russia and all the rest of it. If the young British lads conquered and tamed Napoleon Bonaparte, then the silly Jew hat wearers with their savages at the borders will be no contest, because when the chips are down time and time and time again, our comrades on this island have stood shoulder to shoulder and have won, and by God, we will.
Absolutely. Well said, sir. Well said. That's absolutely correct. Once they get off their backsides, when when it comes to it, when it needs to come to it, it will be done. Perhaps not in a way that we can imagine, but it will be done.
I've always looked at this, and it's not. I think a lot of people are going to look for something big to be the smoking gun. I think it's going to come from the smallest of things. Truly, I think a lot of people are waiting and they see things playing out and they're going, surely to God, this is going to be it. Surely to God, this is going to be it. I don't think it's going to come from a big event that's, and even like in the States or Australia and France and Germany, I don't think it's going to be a big, oh my God, I can't believe that's just happened. I think it's going to be the smallest of things that's going to basically kickstart, and then people are going to say, do you know what, enough's enough. We can't deal with this politically. We can't deal with this through this means. We're going to have to basically band together, and that will galvanise people up and down the ground for this country. That will galvanise our brothers and sisters across Europe and so on and so forth. And it'll be like it'll be like dominoes just falling. It will take the tiniest wee thing, and that will set the whole thing into motion. And then it'll be like that saying, and then for one day, no reason at all, these angry people just decided to put all of us out. That's exactly how that will play out. And
Yeah,
for better or worse, the very tragic nature in this, the very tragic nature in this is the European people, for the longest time, however, what way people trying to jazz this up, they went round the world, they built civilizations, they built countries, they made the most of resources, they showed people. I mean, even Zimbabwe had to recall the white farmers because the people couldn't grow a fucking plant. And we're expected to believe these people were capable of building a tenement, never mind the pyramids. Jesus Christ, God have mercy,
and don't forget the steel ships on the Clyde about.
Oh, good God, John, and I mean this kindly. It's like they have went round the world. They have been very gracious, very decent, very hospitable, very generous, very giving, to have constantly attacked and slugged and provocation thrown their way time and time and time again. And the sad thing is, the absolute kindness and loving nature of our people has been bastardized to a point where, after all the chips have been down, after things have came to settle, it's going to take a long time for certain people to return back to that generous, loving way that they were, because they have been so
Yeah,
bastardized and attacked and vilified for
yeah,
basically having those basic human decency instincts in them themselves. That
yeah,
is why I pointed out earlier on, when this comes to a halt and when it finishes up, it won't ever happen again, because the absolute point where people have been pushed to, it will probably have almost changed their character.
Yeah, once they come awake and see what has happened, it'll become a fury like no other. That's for sure. I can see that. They'll be running off the beach and they're trying to be doing the Jesus and try and walk on the water to get them back to France away from us.
See, you know, this is something. Oh God, what's the name of that place? Now this is gonna do my head in. It was just what you were saying about France. Like, there's a place in France, right? And I had literally seen a video of it earlier on. Now, if you give me a wee second,
Sure.
it's called Le Port en Velay, right? What I'll do is I'll type out the name. I've probably butchered it because let's be honest, a Scotsman trying to put on an accent's never a good thing. And there's a guy called Lumi that's within the Scrubs chat. If he was here, he'd have probably been able to pronounce that for us. But there we go. He's an intelligent chap. So this is the name of the place in France, right? I've put
Uh-huh.
it in the chat for people. I'd encourage people to go and look at this, right? This is an absolute beautiful part of the world. Beautiful part. They've got quite literally churches on mountains in this place. It's a lot of old architecture. It's kind of got a mixed collaboration of like what you would say is like the Mediterranean type, and it's got kind of a like the old Gothic type architecture,
Yeah.
and quite and you know like the holiday look. I probably not doing it any justice, but I'd encourage people to just Google and look at the pictures of this place because when I was looking at this earlier on, I was like, if there was, you get this with certain places in Germany, you get it with like places like in certain places in London, the Cotswold, etc., down south. There's certain places in Edinburgh and you can get it as well. If there was ever a picture that kind of has a vast diversity of marvel in one singular place for Europe, it is quite literally that. That is the hand that God gave us as a people to carve out, and it quite frankly is fucking beautiful. It is literally a work of art. And I honestly, John, you sit down with a cup of tea later on, or even tomorrow, and have a wee look at this place. This place
Yeah.
looks absolutely picturesque, right out the book.
I love looked at architecture, I really do. It's always been in me that.
People talk about things like the pyramids, right? And the pyramids, fair enough, pretty cool, pretty nice how they've managed to do that when they've done it. But quite frankly, I think there's a lot cooler, more beautiful, truly beautiful works of art in Europe
Oh
compared to the
God,
pyramids.
of course. All over the bloody place. All over the place. Magnificent architecture. Truly amazing.
I mean, you even look at some of the places in Germany where they've got these big
Oh,
castles, and I know Edinburgh's on top of a volcano, and quite frankly, that is super impressive how it's been built in the time when it's been built. But it's the
sure.
exact same with places in Germany. You've got literally like just hills, and they've got like these castles, no matter how, and there's nothing run about them. And then, with the greatest respect, you've got these people that can't even drive, can't even cycle one of these electric bikes, and are then Uber Eats, and they're coming in and telling us that their uncle Tyrone somehow left the African jungle to come here and build these castles to then go back home and not have any stamp or any sort of intelligent design back in the homeland. It's absolute beggar's belief.
I know. I know. I know. The trouble is, I think, to be slightly more serious about it, I think the danger is, Scots, that they're inclined to believe it.
Well,
That's
let's
the
be
danger.
honest, John. If you take a people, and I mean this with the kindest respect, that aren't as intelligent, don't have that rationality of a decent IQ, and you turn around and show them something, and you put a couple of pictures out, and you say, "Oh, by the way, That was yours that done that a long, long time ago. Look, there's a picture there. They put you into the box, even though it's not a real picture. It's like a hand sketch thing at best. You know,
Yeah,
it's almost like telling a toddler about Santa Claus and the Tooth Fairy. They're going to
yeah,
take that face value and they're going to believe that. And that's the mentality that you're dealing with.
yeah. I think that's why it's dangerous, because it'll lead to arguments. When somebody says, "You didn't build that, son," it's the beginning of an argument.
I had an argument with a folk. DJ had done a thing ages ago, and it was about people in Glasgow, and I don't know if you remember, John, because it was all over the news, and they were trying to change the name of the streets in the city centre because it was based on quote unquote slave traders and people that had things
Uh,
in the Caribbean and stuff like that, right? And I had
right.
an argument with a guy, and he's going, they need to do something because they people suffered in them. How did they suffer? Oh, on a serious note, you're expecting me to believe that people who couldn't build an IKEA shelf somehow built this entire continent?
What
And
a nonsense.
so see me, I laugh because because the whole crux of it is ignorance is bliss, and if that's what they want to believe, let them believe it. If they want to believe that they were samurai Chinese warlords, let them believe it. It's fine. They're never going to get out the hellhole that they're in. That's up to them.
Well, you see that apparently. I know that I've been there, but apparently, if you go to Africa, you see that quite starkly. If you visit a country that was part of a colonial empire and an African country that wasn't, apparently the differences are incredibly stark. You just cannot miss it. And I'm
See,
inclined to believe it.
no, John. See, to be honest, it's so mad. I was actually taken aback. I had seen a video, and it was based on when Rhodesia was at its peak,
Uh-huh.
and it looked a fantastic place to live. I'm not going to lie. The place was spotless. The weather looked fantastic. The scenery was absolutely lovely. And see, I think even in this video, it touched on certain parts of South Africa, and it shows you what they were like. And I think at the time it was roughly around about 2017, 2018, and you can talk about day and night, but I don't even think that distance covers the scope of how bad the places have turned out to be. Truly, and
Yeah.
it kind of it shows a clear demonstration because, with the greatest respect, the colonials, the British, the Dutch, the French, the Portuguese, and the Spanish went into parts of the world. When they chose to leave, they left things in place for civilizations to function and
Yeah.
build upon themselves. There's only two classic examples where they fucked it up big time. Pardon my language. That is the whole entirety of the occupied regions of Africa and India. Parts of China, parts of Latin America, and all the rest of it are functioning to a very decent standard to this day. I mean, the Chinese have totally excelled compared to everybody else,
Yeah,
but
of
at least
course.
the Chinese had that ethic to get their hands dirty and build upon it.
Yeah.
Indians and Africans have had no appetite whatsoever, but yet, they're the first ones to play the poor me. You just have to look at how everybody else in the world functions with the things that have been left behind, and they've done absolutely well. But again, despite having the best tools available to further develop themselves, they've still ran to the land of milk and honey because, quite frankly, again, just to reiterate, these people couldn't build an IKEA shelf.
I say, excuse me. This is a conversation that we are no longer allowed to have, Scots, and that is um, IQ. A very famous book. I don't know how many people in the chat will I've heard of it or I've read it, called The Bell Curve. You ever heard of it?
I have. Scottish Tam actually spoke about this book to me. Oh God, about 2 or 3 years ago. He took the Bell Curve and the Culture of Critique. I think he says
Yeah, that's right.
I've read half the Culture of Critique because it was on a PDF, but then that got corrupted, and I've just not been able to find another copy of it since.
Well, they don't want you to find a copy, of course. But people went to jail over this book because it was all the rage of conversation up and down the lands everywhere at one point. Because it was based on stats of IQ tests across the different races. We're not talking about small sample. We're talking about large scale samples, large scale testing, etc., etc. But certain people were not happy with the conclusions that were being drawn because, if believed, it meant that there were certain types of people that were of low IQ. And low IQ was something that could not be changed, nor was it something that could be fixed or improved. And that didn't suit the powers that be. But just so that those who have not any experience of this book understand the point that's important to make, white people, Caucasians, as it turned out, are not the cleverest people on the planet. That's just a fact. Using these measurements, they are not. As it turns out, the cleverest people on the planet are Indians.
It's very sad to hear, John. I don't say it like in the aspect of whites have a divine right to be masters of the intellect above anybody else. What I mean is for the way that India is, for the slums, and I don't know if you're quite with the finger on the pulse with these videos that go viral with the Indian street food people. You know,
No,
you see, and then the manufacturing companies when they're working. Oh God, honestly, it's you don't want to see it. Honestly, you'd go to bed having nightmares about things. But the
I'll
point
try
that
and
I'm making,
visit then. I'll try and visit.
it's honestly, John, it's mind blowing how
Sure,
disgustingly bad people are with their attitudes and habits over there. And
sure.
you see obviously all these trains and people dying because there's too many people on the train, there's too many people on top of the train, and you
Yeah,
think if these people are truly intelligent for the country to be in, not even for the government, just the people having decent standards within themselves, having that example of living life in a clean, healthy, organised, civilized manner.
sure.
If they can't do that, despite having that level of intelligence, then that's beyond sad. That's a very sad crime.
Yeah, but I've probably explained this rather badly. It doesn't mean that Indian folk are all highly intelligent, because they're not. These are averages worked out over large population sizes. The biggest upset came to the Jews because it turned out they weren't the smartest and they expected to be, and they weren't. It was the Indians, but not every Indian is smart, just as not every Indian is stupid. Likewise with Caucasians, etc., etc. So there is a certain amount of how should I say, careful interpretation of all the figures before you apply them. But that's what happened, was that they were being applied to populations, and it caused divisions between nations. For example, the British Army was one of the first institutions to use IQ tests, and they used them during the First World War to decide who would march across the open fields of Flanders. So all the people who scored badly in these tests were picked to walk across the field and face the machine guns because they were seen as cannon fodder. And they've been used that way more or less ever since, not just by the British Army, of course. But that doesn't make them any less human.
No, I'd agree with that. Like, but you know, you make a good point there, and it's probably something to worth come back at another time and maybe have a wee bit of a think about it when we have time. Just what
Sure.
you're saying there about obviously the Jews expecting it to come out high on that, and they didn't.
Yeah.
And probably like because these people have always got access to data and the rest of it, but I think by a large part that's why I'm not saying wholly, but as a byproduct why miscegenation's pushed as hard as it is, because obviously that the IQ difference between the sad thing there is the strongest IQ parent, that's the most intelligent it's going to get at that point, because it's obviously going to take byproduct from the lesser IQ parent, and
Correct.
that's going to be somewhere in the middle. Then the child naturally after that, depending on who they have kids with, could have an even further knock-on effect. And as we know with the Jewish people, they're quite by a large part with many. It's the same with the Pakistanis, if you don't mind me saying. They marry their cousins and start families and stuff like that. So
Yeah.
that's not a surprise to hear that. And I think looking at the way that the Western world is, that's probably why things are pushed as hard as what it is, to try and kind of keep the masses dumbed down even further.
So that our audience can understand this, I'll put it very, very simply. And this is where we need to be mindful in this country. If you take a black man and a white woman and they have a child, that child will take the IQ from the black man. And IQ cannot be changed upward. If that resulting mixed child, was to do the same thing again, say it was a girl, and that girl child was to have a child with another black man, then the resulting child IQ will be further decreased. And you get to the point where you start talking about IQs in the range of 78 and 67, and you get very close to imbecilic. Now, the way I'm talking tonight was verboten for a long time because people could see the danger if it went unchecked. You find it very difficult to get a hold of any of these books and the figures from the tests that were done. And I'd like you to think about it, what that means for nations. That's why we're considered, we are considered to be highly dangerous. And that's why they just love to spread this idea that our women should be having babies to black children or brown children. For the reasons I'm just explaining to you. Now, I'm sure that most of you will have never heard this before and will be rather shocked by it. And I was too when I first heard it at the age of 16. Budgies chipping in. Mixed race children don't have the same blood or bone marrow as either parent. That's not good if they need a transfusion. Well, that's right. That's why they look different. Quite apart from all the psychological problems that it brings. The child does not feel psychologically part of either race. They are without a race. They are without a people. And it usually ends tragically for these children.
Yeah, John, I think that's one of the things that kind of gets overlooked as well, because obviously there's health issues that kind of play out, and then when you take two opposites and put them together, it's then what can eventually come out of that through genetic mutations is just one of many examples. I mean, going off subject, but I mean, like that's a good education point of reasons why. I know somebody that recently kept somebody in our family kept having issues, and they were saying, it's to do with the iron this, the iron in the body's that. They're reckoning they're anemic, they're reckoning this, all these different things, and I've been sitting listening, and I kind of a piped in conversation. You know me, I'm not malicious. I just kind of like hearing people out, and had said, if you tried the copper levels, the individual looked at us and went, what do you mean? And I says, I'm not a doctor, but from what I've gathered over the years, if your iron levels are low, it's because your copper levels aren't functioning properly. And they don't test for copper in this country. There's certain tests that you can do for iron. I think the spectrum's about 13 different tests, but the NHS tests for about 5, if I'm correct. I says, but I would put a bet on saying if you fix the copper levels, the iron levels, if you get the copper at optimum health, the iron levels naturally come up because they're interlinked. But if the iron level's low, it's because the copper's low. So off they went. A couple of weeks later, was sitting in the cafeteria, and the same boy came in and he was talking about it, and he says, how did you find me about that copper thing, just out of curiosity? And I had said I'd came across a paper, believe it or not, during COVID times, and I had read through it, and it was talking about like I can't remember if the copper's like red and the iron's blue, or if the iron's red and the copper's blue. But basically, when they interlink you, it promotes good mitochondria in the system, and that under a microscope effectively becomes purple, and there's so many benefits. You've got good level of mitochondria. I mean, your copper levels are high, etc., so on and so forth. So I've literally went through and explained all this. And I've naturally turned around and says, like, for example, how's your partner doing? Is she okay? And he said she's away for a test next week, but so far she seems to be doing okay. And I was like, well, that's fair enough. So I hadn't seen him for about another 2 or 3 weeks at this point. And then we came in, again, lunch break again, because sometimes the way my lunch break is I go early afternoon. And then on an odd occasion, depending on the way my work is, I go late afternoon. And this just happened to fall in the afternoon. And the boys come in, he's talking about it, and he starts and says, by the way, you were on the money. I says, say that again. He says, you were on the money about the copper. They've upped her copper levels. She's been taking high-dense copper foods, spinach, kale, beef liver, etc. Bang, in the space of a few weeks, turned it right around. She's absolutely fine. And I said, that's really good to hear. He said that she'd been having the issues for months. And then doctors there had spoke about these things. Doctor didn't want to hear it, so she went and got a second opinion. They had basically done some blood tests. Right, okay, the copper is a wee bit low, etc., so on and so forth. Changed her eating habits, and she's been absolutely fine. They had no issues since. Now, we get it hard enough of our health system. They don't test you for all the right things, and even the things that they do test, they don't do enough in-depth test with the bloods and that they get from people. They just simply don't do it for reasons. Obviously, we know why, but that's a whole other conversation. But as I try to explain to the gentleman, the body naturally can heal itself. It sounds absolutely mind-boggling. It sounds like it's an absolute ludicrous thing to say, but it genuinely can. What you've got to do is you've got to have the right toolkit for your body and the right environment first and foremost to make sure that your body has the best chance to do that. Because when you start having things with your body, it is symptoms of something under the bonnet that needs fixed. It's like a car. And the way that the mitochondria works in that aspect is basically they're like wee batteries. They're like your electrical charger. They need to be optimum health for your body to function. And with that, it's based on the copper element. And when I explained that to him, he turned and says, well, she's been taking that now for weeks and she's absolutely fine. It just boggles my mind that the doctors wouldn't have tested her for this. And I turned and said, because he was talking about an issue today with himself. And I says, if you had a candida test, and he looked at us and he went, what do you mean by that? I says, well, candida is a type of, it's like a fungus. It's a type of fungus, but you need to get tested to get a candida test, and they'll tell you what type of candida you have if you've got it, and then if you have, then the remedies are very simple to fix that. Well, lo and behold, after a few weeks, he managed to get a candida test, and it came back. They told him what type of candida he had, and he managed to replicate it, because a lot of things that's caused by us, especially in the gastronomy side of things, comes from like yeast overgrowth, comes it comes from mold that is literally lying in your system, and bang, all these things grow. But if you can create an environment within your body and you give yourself the right attitude and mindset, your body will naturally overcome it. You just need to get the nutrients and the time and environment to do that.
Yeah. Give it a kick start. Yeah, I believe that. There's far too much that's held back for various political reasons. I'm not claiming to be any kind of expert here, folks, because I'm not. I just know a little bit. And I know that certain things, such as IQ, cannot be fixed. That's why they're so dangerous. And that's why there are certain people or certain groups would like very much for our IQ to drop by 5 to 10 points. because there's no coming back from it. And that does away with resistance, because it does away with cognitive ability, depth of thought. And these things could be shown very easily, but you would end up in a court case if you went down that road. It's so much of a toxic subject because of the knowledge that's there. And I don't really think it would be wise for us to talk any further on the subject. Certainly not at this time of the night. But I'd ask you all to at least casually have a look at the subject. And you will see, at the very least, that I'm not lying. So, Scots Armour, my good friend, I'm going to close the live stream. I need to be sharp because I was a bit later last night getting to bed, and it's not a good thing for me these days.
Well, sir, let me just quickly say,
Yeah,
firstly, thank you very much for having me on tonight. I've really enjoyed our conversation. And for everybody in the chat that's, put up with me and everything else and came along to support your channel, God bless you, and thanks for tuning in. But more importantly, John, you've got to do what's right for you. So you've got to make sure that you're on the ball, you're looking after yourself, you're getting well rested. No one would begrudge you that. And God bless John Davidson, sir. Keep you in the best of health that can possibly be.
well, thank you. Appreciate that. Have you got any last minute words before I remove you from the live stream?
No, just to everybody that's listening at home, cherish those that you have near and dear. Look out for your brothers and sisters, and hopefully we get to see each other again soon. Until then, God bless.
Excellent. Okay, folks. As I always like to say, adios, au revoir, cheerio, and good night. Thank you, Tight Scotsman, for your donation. Well, I see your name there. Now, I shall return, all being well, on Tuesday at 9 o'clock. And to answer your question, Trevor, I decided to try my expensive headphones that I used to use for recording purposes rather than the little bud things, because I've got a guest on. I don't like those buds things. They hurt my ears. So I thought I'd try this out. That meant, of course, that I can't put on a hat. I don't like that, of course, but never mind. State of the ears is important. So, it's back to normal. I'm glad you had a good time last night. I know I did. I was quite amazed at the total number of the audience. That gave us a bit of a surprise. So, take care, folks, and we'll speak again.
Silently the snow falls, paints a winter scene, swiftly spreads the dark rim, hides the fading autumn green. Moonbeams brush the dark wood, conjure friendships dear to me. Lightly now the breeze flows, disturbing more than just the leaves. But life's much more than we can know. We are one small glow in the eternal flow. Patiently the love grows, lifts the weary heart. Gently now she holds me, melts two worlds once apart. Moonbeams brush the dark wood, usher dreams of you and me. Softly then the breeze blows, disturbing more than just the trees.
All together now.
But love's much more,
So much more
than we can know.
than we can ever possibly know.
We are one small glow,
But an important glow
in the eternal flow. Melodies of long ago, songs of innocence, harmonies to soothe the soul, have some consequence. Moonbeams brush the dark wood, awakening joys of you and me. Silently the snow falls, bringing winter symphony.
all together now.
But we're much more
So much more
than we can know.
than we ever possibly know.
We are one small glow,
But an important glow
in the eternal flow. But life's much more than we can know. We are one small glow in the eternal flow.
Thanks everyone for being here tonight. Hopefully I'll see you all on Tuesday.